I don't think it's about this military intervention. It's more about going to the highest bid possible and then negotiating down. And I think it's important that Denmark and European leaders are serious about the security of Europe and then being engaged in what's going on in Greenland and in the Arctic. This is an issue that has been raised again and again by farmers. Where are you in the streets protesting? There's going to be food flown over from South America to your table. Where are the local farmers? Where is this organic food? Where is this, from the land to your mouth food strategy? Where is it? It's out of the window and you are not in the streets.
I mean, it shows how far they have went down the road, how much investment they have put into bringing down the Hungarian government. Actually, because they have done it this very European Union way, it didn't work so far because they don't understand the Hungarian people. The problem is that the Hungarian people are not left-wing like the European Union is, so they will never be able to topple the Hungarian government, the current one, by supporting a left-wing movement.
Welcome to the MCC Brussels podcast. I am your host, John O'Brien, Head of Communications at MCC Brussels. This week, Europe finds itself exposed, strategically, politically, and morally. Not by an external enemy, but by the slow collapse of its own assumptions. From Greenland to the EU budget to Hungary, we are watching the same pattern repeat itself. Europe talks about power, autonomy, and values, but recoils and runs away the moment those words are tested by reality. Let's start in the Arctic. Greenland, the territory linked to an EU member state and firmly embedded in NATO, has had to publicly remind the world that it's not for sale. Both Greenlandic and Danish leaders have rejected Donald Trump's renewed push to bring Greenland under US control, whether through negotiations, political pressure, or force. That threat alone should have triggered a decisive European response. Instead, it has triggered panic, because this is a scenario NATO was never designed to handle. One member threatening another. NATO has no pants on. It's a Potemkin sham, and now every dog on the street knows it. That same weakness is now playing out inside the EU itself, the budget. The Mercosur trade deal has detonated a political bomb under the EU budget. Brussels wants to shift hundreds of billions away from agriculture and regional development towards defence spending and industrial policy. Farmers, the backbone of Europe's food security, are being told to accept cheaper imports, while subsidies are being quietly repurposed for abstract geopolitical ambitions. What could go wrong with this type of thinking? Once again, Europe is divided. Northern capitals push for competitiveness and defence. Southern and rural regions are told to sacrifice. The budget overhaul is unravelling, and with it the illusion that Brussels understands the real Europe beyond its policy papers and documents. And then there is Hungary. Ahead of a crucial April election, the European Commission has frozen everything related to Hungary. Funding decisions, infringement procedures, even their sensitive investigations, openly admitting it does not want to help Orban during the campaign by being seen to undermine a sovereign government? Does this tell us that the Commission has a team working 24/7, working all year round to undermine the Hungarian government, and they are taking some time off before the election? Or does it tell us they are just going to be a little more sneaky in doing the undermining they do all the time of Hungary? This is not rule of law enforcement. This is political timing, selective pressure, strategic silence. Put these three stories together and a darker picture emerges, a Europe that cannot defend its territory, tied to one of its own. A Europe that weakens its farmers to fund its ambitions it cannot deliver. A Europe whose institutions increasingly choose sides instead of applying rules equally and fairly. That's what we'll be unpacking today. And welcome to my MCC Brussels colleagues, Richard Schenk, Research Fellow, Agnieszka Kolek, Head of Cultural Engagement. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Does the Greenland confrontation expose, Richard, a hard truth that Europe cannot defend sovereignty of an EU-linked territory without getting US approval?
In this case, yes, because the EU has forgotten that to defend Greenland, the typical strengths of the EU, like trade policy, is by far not enough. It requires Arctic warfare capabilities. This is hard military stuff, hard power. And the truth is that, especially the EU, because the EU is minus Norway, right?
Yeah.
So especially the EU and the EU member states have very little capabilities in this regard. Basically, only 2 states have serious military capabilities in the Arctic. That's obviously the United States and, to a lesser degree, Russia.
Agnieszka, if NATO can be pushed to the brink, the moment one member threatens another, does this reveal that this whole Western alliance is far weaker than Europe admitted?
I think that's been the case for many years. And we can go back to this famous picture of Trump talking to European leaders at one of the summits when he pointed out to them that they're not contributing enough into NATO. And at that time, there was a lot of laughter and chattering among the elites. How dare he, and who is he to say it to them, and so on. And unfortunately, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, that all came into light again, looking at the budgets, how much they contribute into NATO. But then we need to go back to the bigger framing of that since the end of the Cold War, it seemed that they were a little bit lost. They seemed to lose their raison d'être. And I think that's a very important question that should be addressed on this topic.
That NATO has lost its way.
Yes.
Is Europe, Richard, now paying the price for decades of neglecting defense, the Arctic, critical minerals, proving that the EU cannot act as a global power because it refuses to confront the realities of geopolitics?
Yes, I mean, the Arctic region was, at the first when it became geopolitically significant, was during the Cold War. So already in the 1950s, there were a lot of American and Soviet nuclear bombers over the Arctic, and they tried to use this weak spot in each other's air defenses. And back then, Europe had significant capabilities that were not rivaling the US's, but we could complement them to a certain degree. That was obviously not longer the case, not longer cared for by the European nations after 1990. So yes, we are paying the price, and we are also paying the price for the hubris that followed this military decline, because we thought that European diplomacy is so strong, our soft power is so strong, our trade relationships and international relations will be able to compensate for the loss of military power. But this was a complete delusion.
Agnieszka, it looks like the EU has lost the plot. It looks like NATO, according to you, lost the plot a long time ago. How do you think Denmark comes out of this whole scenario, considering, the way it was looking after Greenland?
I think it shows the impotence and lack of vision. And I think it's important to pay attention to how Trump is bringing that into light, and then also by putting this pressure, how he makes them to take action. And I think that would be very interesting process to watch how that would play out, because I don't think it's about this military intervention. It's more about going to the highest bid possible and then negotiating down. And I think it's important that Denmark and European leaders are serious about the security of Europe and then being engaged in what's going on in Greenland and in the Arctic.
Thank you. Moving on topic now to Mercosur and the unravelling of the EU budget. Why, Richard, is Brussels so determined to cut funding for farmers? They're the very backbone of Europe's food security.
Why? Because Europe is running out of money. They need the money elsewhere. There is no way to tax significantly more out of European citizens, because we already have sky-high taxes. The social welfare spending in the most member states is very high, so you cannot cut the member states' budget also significantly. Nevertheless, they want to have more money for Ukraine. They want to have more money for EU projects, for NGOs and other stuff. So they need to cut money somewhere, and because the farming subsidies were one of the biggest part of the former EU budget, of this, they were an obvious part to part to search for money. What they have miscalculated is that over the years, this money in real terms has actually shrunk. So the farmers were already on thin budgets, and they have imposed more and more burdens on farmers. Basically, everything is now more regulated than 10 years ago, and they get less money for it.
Mm-hmm.
This put many farms on thin margins, and this caused their uproar in rural communities.
To follow up on that, Richard, if the Mercosur deal can only survive by compensating farmers with emergency funds, doesn't that suggest that the agreement fundamentally undermines European agriculture?
Yes, I mean, even the proponents of the deal say, okay, yeah, in regarding agriculture is not so good for us, but at least the industry is better off because we can sell more cars. So, in overall terms, this would benefit the European economy, as they say. Nevertheless, they ignore that certain parts of European societies are heavily negatively impacted by this Mercosur agreement, and also they calculated that the economic benefits will generate political support for this, but this is not no longer the case because the problems of European industry is actually not related to that we are not able to sell enough cars in Brazil, for example. The problems arise from our domestic policies that literally forbid the technology that made the European car industry globally competitive.
Mm-hmm. Agnieszka, is the battle over the EU budget a sign that Brussels has lost touch with rural Europe, prioritizing abstract ideas like strategic autonomy over real families, real farms, real communities?
I don't think that they don't really pay attention to them. I think that they perceive their power to be so big in controlling the narrative, controlling what's being said in the public square, that they can squash this protest, that they can find ways how to almost manipulate the public, because in the public sphere it looks a little bit like that the farmers are just asking for more money. And if we are not allowed the free speech to then hear the side of the farmers, because obviously they are not from this electoral class that they sit on LinkedIn and they constantly post about who they've seen and to which conference they've gone, because they actually work on the land and deliver the goods to the table. They are not able to communicate that as well as possible, while the European Commission and the forces that control the media and the online discourse, they are able to curtail it. And this is an issue that has been raised again and again by farmers, that the consumers will be affected, the quality of the food will go down, and the food security. And here I would like to address especially people concerned about the environment. Where are you in the streets protesting? There's going to be food flown over from South America to your table. Where are the local farmers? Where is this organic food? Where is this, from the land to your mouth food strategy? Where is it? It's out of the window and you are not in the streets.
I think that's a really critical point. I'm really glad you made it, because farmers have been silenced. And the mainstream media doesn't cover what they have to say. It appears sometimes as though, the farmers are in this for the money. I'm glad you pointed out the problem with this deal in the first place. Richard, I want to move on to talk about Hungary. The Commission made a decision to freeze Hungarian-related files. Does that show that Brussels is no longer a neutral arbiter, but a political actor trying to shape the outcome of a national election?
I mean, obviously, the European Commission, since Jean-Claude Juncker, 12 years ago, announced that he wants to lead a political commission, is a political body. I mean, they've declared themselves so. Regarding the Hungarian elections in April of 2026, the election campaign at European level already began in October 24, because when we had this discussion in the European Parliament about the back then Hungarian presidency of the European Council, a routine exercise in European politics became suddenly a showdown between the Hungarian Prime Minister and the opposition leader, who is an MEP, and Ursula von der Leyen, who clearly took sides on the side of the Hungarian opposition. And it's very, very clear, even if you look in the EU documents and so on, that the EU is not treating Hungary as a regular member state. The same issue is treated differently in Hungary because it is Hungary, because it has this government in place. So, and now they have basically stopped all proceedings regarding Hungary because there are a lot of routine stuff that is going on in the EU Commission regarding Hungary every day. And they have stopped everything just because they're so afraid that if something is decided on Hungary, this might benefit the current government.
Or they will be seen to have tried to throw an election. Yes. They don't want to be seen. I wonder what the guarantee is that they're not working behind the scenes in a more subtle way to achieve the same outcome. It's a full-time job to be attacking Hungary as much as they do.
Yeah, I mean, it shows how far they've went down the road, how much investment they have put into bringing down the Hungarian government. Actually, because they have done it this very European Union way, it didn't work so far because they don't understand the Hungarian people. There was a government EU government document leaked some days ago from 2019 that explicitly said that the problem is that the Hungarian people are not left-wing like the European Union is. So they will never be able to topple the Hungarian government, the current one, by supporting a left-wing movement. Actually, they seem to have learned a bit out of this experience, but it just shows how much effort already went into this project.
Agnieszka, how can the EU credibly defend rule of law when it enforces it so selectively, acting aggressively against some governments, ignoring similar things when they're not convenient in other countries?
I think we can study that case on the case of Poland. Yes, and it's with the rule of law, obviously, with the changes to the courts. I'm sure the viewers have followed our reports and discussions on that, the deep dives, and I recommend to go back to them to listen to just the beginning of the story, because obviously it's continuous, that it's become more and more chaotic with what's going on legally in Poland, and obviously European Commission is not interested in that because it's the government in power now that is in their favor. But in relation to that, how far they go with the narrative and also kind of giving favors is that we see that, for example, with Poland, they try to lower the narrative related to migration pact, not to affect the ratings of the current government in Poland and Prime Minister Donald Tusk. And there are talks even about how maybe they will even try to postpone the migration pact being in power in Poland until after the elections in 2027. So there's a playbook for that. There are already proven cases how things work, and constantly there is work being done to improve, to get it more right. So definitely we should watch this election in Hungary and be mindful of the dirty tricks being played.
What did both of you make of the no confidence vote in the Mercosur deal? Richard?
Well, the no confidence vote in the Mercosur deal reflects a series of the decisions that were taken by the von der Leyen Commission over the course of last year that were highly unpopular, both among the general population and in member states. And political parties feel the pressure that they need to do something about it. And one of the few opportunities to hold the European Commission really into account and provided by the European treaties is this no confidence vote. I mean, it's very hard to remove the Commission because you require a 2/3 majority, but nevertheless, you have a vote on it. You see who is supporting this course of action and who isn't. And this is why we had the series of unpopular decisions followed by each one followed by a vote of no confidence. Sadly, I think this is not enough, and over time this instrument will become less and less effective. Nevertheless, it's the only one we have in the European level.
Actually, I was thinking how signing of the Mercosur deal affected the political situation in France. And this is also something that we should follow because it creates a massive political crisis, and it will continue unfolding because obviously for farmers, this is a livelihood. So it's not something that is just, it just didn't go my way and my working conditions will be slightly more difficult, but it's actually existential threat for them. So I actually think that it might cause the fall of the government.
Richard, final question to you. If Brussels is willing to quietly manipulate timing and pressure to weaken an elected government, what's it say about the health of the European project and this growing divide between the EU institutions and nation states?
Well, Hungary is kind of like a very dangerous example. If small Hungary that is not exactly one of the most powerful member states in the European Union can get away with deviating from the European mainstream, that sets a very dangerous precedent for the European mainstream as it is. And they know that, they say that often, that they need to make a stand in Hungary because otherwise everything will fall apart. I think if the European Union would be an attractive project, as attractive as it was in the beginning of its existence, then they shouldn't worry about Hungary. So just a small comparison, in 1999, when in Austria you had a change in government, there was also this big outcry, fascist and rule of law and whatever. But back then the EU was strong enough to just wait for 6 months, and then the crisis was gone again. So this is what the EU should be aiming for, is not to crack down on any kind of dissent, but to be as attractive that people don't want to dissent from it.
Richard, Schenk, Agnieszka, Kolek, thank you very much for joining me. And that's it for the MCC Brussels podcast this week. Do give us a like, do share this podcast with your friends, and do tell us what you think. We always want to hear. Until next time, thank you very much.